welcome you all today from CFA Society India's perspective on this professional learning session that we've been planning in this difficult times. I really appreciate all of your intent towards being more productive and on towards being more continuously focused in terms of learning. Before we start and I introduce the speaker for the day, some housekeeping points for everybody. This is going to be a 1-hour session. 30 minutes will have the speaker delivering his content to you, and then post that we'll have the Q&A. You all are requested to put your questions into the Q&A segment. At the end, there is this slide or a handout which has already been mailed to you also, which is again visible to everybody on their screen. You have a view option where if the visibility is less, you can increase the view from 100% to 150 or 200%. Again, at the end of the session, we request all of you to provide your feedbacks as they are very important to us. There is a survey link which is already been shared to you in the confirmation mail. Also, we'll be sharing the same link into the chat box for the CFA Society members to avail that CE credit. It's very important to provide this survey. It's a procedural part. Now, let me move to introduce the speaker for the day, Mark Fritz, an author, a leadership coach, a mentor to many, a good friend to me, and above all, a very nice person. It's been 5+ years that I've been knowing Mark, and from that day onward, there is a lot of learning that I've drawn from Mark's idea about developing things. It is like we are already into difficult times, and as they say, in difficult times, personalities are tested, at the same time built also. I suppose this is what we are here for. Mark wants today all of us to be leading the torch bearers in their prospective domains in these times. That's what basically I draw an inference from leading yourself first. Mark, if you could show more insight and lights to how we could be taking things ahead more professionally in a profound manner, at the same time behaviorally and integrally more strong.
Okay, thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'd like to share 5 key ideas around leading yourself. And leading yourself is so critical because you know, you have the foundation of your influence with other people, the foundation of handling difficult times that we're in right now is how we lead ourselves. And one thing I want to say up front is that if you're really leading yourself well, there's no blame. You're not blaming others. You're taking 100% responsibility for your life. So you're kind of like staying in the driver's seat of your life. There's a very interesting Hawaiian philosophy called Ho'oponopono. And the philosophy is around taking 100% responsibility. But the guru of this philosophy said something very insightful. He said, have you ever noticed when you have a problem, you are always there? So, you know, if we're always there for the problem, we're there for the solution. So what I found with very successful people is they lead themselves well, and it all starts with understanding themselves. Because the more you understand yourself, and if you look on the top part of the screen there, the more you understand yourself, the more you can adapt yourself to others, which means the more influence you're going to have. But if you don't understand yourself well, and others understand you better than you understand yourself, you're not in the power of influence. You're going to be influenced by others, and you won't have that power. So it's so critical for you to understand yourself. And when I ask people, I say, well, how do you get to understand you? So you basically have 3 things that for you to understand yourself, and one is feedback. You're going to have to ask feedback from others because you're not going to learn, you know, how you can improve. And think of it this way. If you don't know what you're doing wrong, you can't fix it. Or if you know, if you don't know it, you can't fix it. So you have to ask for feedback. And most people don't ask for feedback because they're scared of hearing something negative. But you can't fix what you don't know. And the best way to ask for feedback is never ask for what you can improve only. Ask for what are you doing well? And then also ask, what could you do better, even better? Not necessarily bad, but even better. So don't be afraid to ask for feedback. And the most successful people are constantly asking for feedback because also they don't have to do as much review. They get the feedback and they can correct themselves. The other thing is you need reflection. So you get the feedback, and if you don't reflect on how to use it, it's not useful. It's like having knowledge but not using it. The best definition of reflection I ever heard is this: reflection is the opportunity to give yourself advice. So if you're not reflecting, you're not giving yourself advice, and you're not changing. I think the best people I know that are reflecting all the time, and particularly doing a weekly reflection, so they keep focused on what they want to accomplish. And the third area that you learn yourself is by meeting people different than you. So when you meet people different than you and they're thinking a certain way, you start to question, well, if they're thinking that way, why do I think this? And so it challenges you to think. You know, there was one consultant who said a very interesting comment one time. He said, my goal in life is to constantly meet people who disturb my view of the world, right? So if you meet people who disturb your thinking, it forces you to think more too. Now, the biggest thing of why you need to understand yourself is you really need to be consistent in your behaviors. So if you don't understand yourself and your emotions are going up and down all the time, or your focus is shifting all the time, you're not consistent. And when you're not consistent, people don't follow you. Think of it this way. When you're not consistent, you raise a question mark in people's minds about you. And if they question one part about you, they start to question a lot of other things. And I found as a leader, when you create question marks in your people's minds, they take less action. And if they take less action, you're not getting as much productivity out of people. So you want to be consistent. I know I had a boss one time who was bald. And I used to go in with 5 difficult items and 5 easy items. And when I hit him with a couple difficult items, the red would go on his head because he'd get angry. And then I'd hit him with some easy items. I let the red come down. And then I go back to the hard items. He was like an emotional thermometer, right? So he couldn't handle his behavior. So think of it this way. 2 benefits of knowing yourself, okay? You're going to have more influence with others, right? And you're going to grow faster because you ask for feedback, you reflect, you constantly think about what you're thinking. So think of it this way. If you never changed your mind in your career, you haven't grown. Because the more you learn about yourself, you change and you evolve and so forth. So, you know, growing is a matter of fact of changing your mind too. So invest the time for feedback, invest the time for reflection, and don't be afraid to meet people different than you. You know, the key is, you know, during the week, you want to meet and talk to people different than you. On the weekends, you want to be around people like you so you can relax and be comfortable. So, and remember the equation of credibility, do equals say. So if you're more understanding yourself better, you're not going to say yes as much. You're going to make your commitments. And when you're consistent delivering your commitments, people are always going to follow you. Okay. So first thing, understand yourself. The second one is you really have to focus on your strengths. Many years ago, there was a study by Gallup, and they interviewed and surveyed, I don't know how many leaders, thousands of leaders. And the most successful leaders, they focus on their strengths more than their weaknesses. See, your strengths drive your success. Your weaknesses only slow it. So if you're only working on what slows you, you're not moving as fast ahead as you could. You think about this, your strengths are your differentiator. It's your competitive weapon. So the more you grow your strengths, the more success you can have. Now there's 2 weaknesses. There's some weaknesses that slow your strengths, and there's some weaknesses that have no connection to your strengths. The weaknesses that have no connection to your strengths, it's not worth working on those. It's worth putting around you people who have strengths in those, so that makes you stronger. The weaknesses that slow you are all interpersonal mostly. And I don't know if you know Marshall Goldsmith. Gold often, even most successful CEOs have two weaknesses. And the first weakness is listening. They don't listen enough. If you got this in terms of listening, you know, when someone does not listen to you, you don't feel valued. And if you don't feel valued, you're not, or you're not going to be influenced by them. So listening is a great way to engage others, and it's gained cooperation. I know when I was leading years ago in Europe here, when I traveled around at different locations, I always asked the general manager, sorry, I think
Mark, your voice seems to be not audible.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you back.
Okay, sorry about that. The line went down for some reason. So I asked to interview these superstars, and the
Mark,
superstar.
I would request if you start from uh, the weaknesses that we need to pass on to somebody.
To pass on to somebody?
The weaknesses we did not need to focus more. That was the time, and then
Okay.
the audio went off.
And then the audio went off. Yet you don't need to work on the ones that you ask yourself. People who have weaknesses, makes you strong. The weakness that you need to work on and key weakness, even the most, is one: listening values others. Okay, so think about it. Whenever someone does feel okay, and so really key, and so the second weakness. So you know, Marshall Goldsmith, he calls this you add too much value. You know, so if you give people answers, they don't have to think, and you have less influence that way as well. So, you know, focus on your strengths. Your strengths drive your success. Your weaknesses slow your success, and they're more around. Because think about it, you could be great at something, but if no one, you're not a team sport, right? You know, you could be great at something, but if you're only doing it, usually your weaknesses is improving your communication skills. So that more people listen. Stories will all people, it's relevant to them, and it's much. So on your other weeks around, you can look at a good leader by the diversity of the team that's around that leader. because that leader is looking for strengths in those other weaknesses. So if a leader hires everybody like them, what have you done? You've multiplied all the strengths, but what have you also done? You multiplied all the weaknesses, okay? So if I make some advice for you guys that will help you to, in your career, to climb, it's always improving those communication skills in your weaknesses, because the more you can engage people with your strengths, the more successful you're going to be using leveraging those. Okay.
Okay. Mark,
So under your
I suppose the audio you're at end is getting breaked up. Can we try it without maybe putting your video off and the audio goes proper
sweet
in that
spot
case?
intersection. Okay.
Can we do it with that way? Maybe the connectivity get resolved with that.
Can you okay?
Let
Can
us just
you
check
hear me
once
now?
before we start the session again. Mark, the audio seems to be breaking again and again. And it seems to be from your end. Can you speak now, Mark?
Can you hear me?
Uh, Guys, be patient for maybe another minute or two till we resolve this technical issue. Seems to be some connectivity issue at Mark's end. Be patient. Sorry for the inconvenience. We'll be back in maybe a minute time.
Hold on. Let me. Uh, Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Mark, you're audible now.
I'm audible now?
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
something went down on the Wi-Fi.
Mike, I would suggest if you could start from the weakness part we talked about, and from there itself, because we missed a lot of stuff from there.
Okay.
Two types of mistakes and all.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so, your strengths drive your success, and apologize for the connection here. This is what happens sometimes. The strengths drive your success. Your weaknesses only slow it. And there's two types of weaknesses. One is a weakness that slows the use of your strength, and the other one is a weakness that has no connection to your strength. And so the weakness that has no connection to your strength, you control those with by by uh, by hiring people around you that have strengths in those weaknesses. Okay, the weaknesses that are slowing you are usually around communication skills. Okay, the first one is really around listening more, because the more you listen, the more questions you ask, the more you're engaging others, and listening. When we listen to people, people feel valued. People feel valued. You'll have more influence with them and more connection. And the other thing is you have to be careful about you know, uh, be careful about giving the answers all to people, because when you give answers to people, you save them from thinking. And if they're not thinking, they're not engaged that way. So your power, you can be very good at something, you have a good strength, but if you're not really focused on, communicating, interacting well with others, they're not listening to you, you're not leveraging it. So, you want to constantly be working on your influencing skills, because it'll definitely, uh, you know, help you in the future. Now, the other thing is that once you know your strengths, you have to really be leading and working within your sweet spot. Your sweet spot is interesting. It's the intersection of your passion, your strengths, and and passion, strengths, and the value or the impact you're going to make. So you can really understand your sweet spot in one key way. Let's say you have a really difficult day. You have a very challenging in terms of problems you're trying to solve and things like this. So when you have and you leave the day with more energy than when you started, probably you were working in your sweet spot. And so as you're good, you like doing it, you're passionate about it, you're good at it, and you're making a big impact on that. And what I found with very good people is you got to keep growing. And the danger is, if you're in that sweet spot in the red zone, is you hold on to things you like to do. And if you hold on to things you like to do too much, it stops you from growing. Because if you hold on to it, you're really comfortable. When you're comfortable, you're not growing. And so as you climb higher and higher, you have to let go of of things you like to do, because if your people could do it, you're actually competing with your people then. So it's so important to understand what your sweet spot is, but then constantly be letting go some of those things you like to do, so your people can grow and by learning something new, and you can grow by taking on something new. So whenever you hold on to things you like to do too much, you're slowing both yourself down and you're slowing others down too. So, a good idea, as I said, to understand your sweet spot is understand when you had a difficult day solving problems, but you left work with more energy than when you started. Okay. So definitely that's the power. Okay. Now, the fourth area is you got to really be working on your focus. See, when you have a clear focus, you're in the driver's seat of your life. When you don't have a clear focus, you're basically driven around by others who have a clear focus. So it's so important for you to maintain that clarity of focus. And there's an interesting story that illustrates this. Focus addition, focus attraction. In fact, if you think about it, it's good for us to choose between good and bad things to do. Okay, the bad we don't want to do, we're going to focus on the good. But in today's world, there's not enough time to do all the good. We have to choose between the great and the good. And the people who have the strong focus are choosing that great, okay, the great part. And so there's an interesting story. There's a sculptor's assistant coming into the sculptor's studio with a big block of marble, very dirty, dusty, disfigured. He says, how are you going to make something beautiful out of this? So sculptor looks at it from every angle, and he says, I see a magnificent stallion, a horse, flowing mane, flared nostrils, very muscular. He says, how are you going to make that horse? He says, I'm going to take my chisel and I'm going to take my hammer and I'm going to chip away and chip away and chip away everything that's not a horse. And what's left over will be a masterpiece. You will be a masterpiece if you're focused on all the key things. So you got to maintain a strong focus, and you have to have the courage to say no to things. And particularly, the most successful people are great at saying no to some of the good in order to focus the right resources on the great. And an interesting thing I want to share with you here is this. If you think about it, if I were to ask you the question, what percentage of your habits and your behaviors are driven by your conscious mind? I asked that today in a session, and some people said like 20%, 40%, 60%. It's actually only 2 to 4% is driven by your subconscious mind. The rest is driven by your conscious mind. The rest is driven by your subconscious mind. And I can prove this in one question. Can you tell me your next thought? You can't, because it just pops up there, okay? So it's so important for you to stay focused, because you have to tell your subconscious mind what to focus on. And you can see the power of a subconscious mind with this one. Think about it. For those of you today on the call who have children, think about when you were pregnant or your partner was pregnant with the very first child. In the middle of the pregnancy, did you suddenly see more baby buggies everywhere, right? You know, you saw them everywhere because it was a dominant thought, lots of emotion, and you saw them everywhere. So that focus, it became an extreme focus that way. So, you know, if you think about it, you know, the more you have a strong focus, the more you see more opportunities to go make it happen. It keeps you in the driver's seat. So think about this in terms of leading yourself. Focus is not about addition. Focus is about subtracting, and particularly subtracting some of the good so that you can work on the great and move you forward faster. Drivers. And if you think about it, where it makes you stronger is in your subconscious mind, not your conscious mind. So you should be constantly trying to make new habits so that you start to do things automatically versus having to force you to do it all the time. Okay. Now, the last particular thing is that you have to manage your stress. You can't use stress as an excuse, right? Because everybody has stresses and things like that. The key is managing your recovery. And recovery is a matter of, it's a concept created many years ago. Actually, it comes from the sports world. But let me show you, I have a glass of water here. And if I were to ask you, where are successful leaders' stress levels? So let's say the water represents stress level. Here's zero stress. Here you're at the top where you have almost, you know, you're overflowing. One small thing someone says, you go nuts. Successful leaders' stress levels are about 2/3 up, okay? They put stress on themselves because they're driven people, but also they add stress because of the people they're working with and the organization and everything, but they're never at the top. So what they do is they put into their week. As the stress is building, they put activities in their week that bring the stress down. And if I'd ask you what brings your stress down, you'd probably say exercise or run or yoga, or some people say meditation. So as the stress builds, you're always putting things in your week that bring the stress down. Therefore, you'll never be at the top, and you'll be able to control your interactions more. If you think of it another way, when you're playing, say, football, you're never really You know, think about this. You're never thinking when you're playing football. You're just doing it by instinct. The same when you're meditating. When you're meditating, you're not thinking and so forth. So in essence, to control your stress more, you need like a mind vacation, okay? And the more you have, you know, you're quieting your mind, the less stress you're having as well. That's why meditation is good. Yoga, other things are good in terms of that. So don't use stress as an excuse, right? Think about adding this space here so that your stress doesn't drive you to be. Just as an aside, this comes from the sports world. Many years ago, I don't know if you watch tennis on TV, but all the top tennis players have a ritual in between points. They're playing with the racket a certain way, they pull their shirt or whatever, but a ritual during the critical points, it actually lowers their heart rate and they're relaxing more because it's something they do all the time. So even in a stress point, a high stress point or a very average point, they're relaxing more. In fact, years ago, they put a heart monitor on the #1 player who had a ritual, and they put a heart monitor on the 150th player who didn't have a ritual, had them play a tennis match, and the one with the ritual was relaxing a little bit, okay? So, you know, you can't be at your best if you're letting stress hurt you, but the more you put recovery in as your stress builds during the week, the less you will have stress bother you. So think about it. What's the best way for you to do for your recovery? Put it as a habit each week in that, and you'll never reach the top where you say something you wish you didn't, okay? So apologize for the connection issues, but I just want to summarize some key things. First thing is you got to know yourself. You got to ask for feedback, reflection. You have to engage other people. The more you know you, the more you can adapt and influence others. Some people are afraid to know themselves because that, but you know, you will change and you'll improve much quicker. Remember, you can't fix what you don't know, so ask for feedback, okay? The second thing is, you know, you got to focus on your strengths and you have to focus on the weaknesses that slow your strengths, particularly your communication skills. Okay? Surround yourself with people for all the rest of the weaknesses. You have to live within your sweet spot, and your sweet spot is the intersection of passion, strengths, and the value, the impact you make. But remember, as you climb, you have to learn to let go of things you like to do in order for you to grow and your people to grow. But think of it this way. If you're holding on to something you like to do and you're not delegating it to your people, you're competing with your people, which is never good. Next one is you have to maintain a strong focus because the focus puts you in the driver's seat of life. And your focus is coming from your subconscious mind. So you've got to be keeping that focus strong to tell your subconscious mind what to work on. And the last thing is you have to manage your stress. Never use stress as an excuse. Put rituals in or things that bring your stress down as the stress builds as you're going up. So those are the key things in terms of leading yourself. Whenever you're leading yourself, remember this. When you're leading yourselves well, you're influencing others. When you're not leading yourself well, you're being influenced by others and you're not in control. You're not in the driver's seat. It's the foundation, and leading yourself is the enabler to handle any circumstances you're given, especially in the circumstances that we have right now in terms of the virus crisis. So hopefully you take a few things away that you can use. And thank you very much. And again, I apologize for the connection issues.
Thanks, Mark. I suppose this has been a very a different thought in this times where everybody into their own self-quarantine, and India level majorly because we are into a lockdown situation, to reassess our own strengths and weaknesses, and the idea of maybe bifurcating weaknesses into two parts. One that you need to manage the other one, which you need to basically pass on and get others help upon. Along with that, you may be focusing on how to reduce this stress part. Again, a very, very important aspect at this level with everybody into the quarantine. There are the stress level, just not for professional, but also at personal and other things have moved to a different level. To start up among the questions, something that popped up right straight is when we talk about leading ourselves first, this starts up from self-discipline. Is that the starting part to it? How do we go about it?
I think there is an amount of self-discipline. And we all have a certain set of discipline and so forth. And you have to focus on the most important things. And, you know, if you think of it this way, successful people have this comparison in their head. Would I rather be disciplined a lifetime and force myself to do it? Or would I rather be disciplined for 30 or 60 days to create a habit? So they're focusing on creating habits so that things happen automatically. Because like in a crisis or in whenever you are very, very busy, you stop doing things and you don't have time to think. You have to have things come out as a habit. So I'd say is that be disciplined enough to create the key habits. You don't need discipline in everything, but you need to be disciplined enough on the key habits that will move you forward.
One thing when we talk about in terms of being a good listeners, at times we end up with a lot of, let's say, subordinates who are at times arrogant towards their job and all. How to be a good listener in those situations when they show a lot of attitude and other aspects also?
Yeah, you know, to be honest, listening, you don't start with listening. Everything starts with the questions you ask. What I found with my own leadership experience and working with very good leaders is they're thinking ahead sometimes of the key questions they need to ask. And it's the same for salespeople. Salespeople have good people skills. They can create rapport very quickly. They're focused on getting to ask. They want to ask the right key questions during the conversation so they get to really get the needs of the client, the prospect, or the customer, so forth. So, you know, being a good listener is more about being a good questioner. And you think about it, you have to ask interesting questions. And if you think about what's everybody's favorite topic is themselves. So when you ask questions in a way that you give other people's experiences, they're going to want to talk about it. They're going to feel great about talking about it. So I would say for you guys, one habit I created is I never go into any meeting without being prepared about the key questions I need to ask. Okay, so that's a habit I created. So I'm always focusing on what do I want to achieve and what are the questions that's going to allow me to achieve it.
One thing that came across is, again, with so many things happening around you, a lot of distractions and all, it at times becomes hard to focus upon things. How do you basically train yourself to be more impromptu in those situations and on your path?
It's very interesting because, you know, a lot of people are visual oriented and so forth, but you have to keep the focus in front of you because so many things will come. And the fastest way to get unfocused is look at your emails because your emails are not your priorities usually. The email inbox is usually other people's priorities asking things of you. So I have various friends that keep a list of the key things on their phone. I have some who have a Post-it note and they put it either on their desk or in the front of their notebook. Everybody has their own way. You know, you can't copy someone's way. But the more it's in front of you, routinely, the more it's hitting your subconscious mind, which means you're going to be stronger in your focus. And the other thing that key people do is they review their focus constantly. So it stays very clear in their head. That's why one of the motivation gurus said many years ago, he says, write out every morning your top 3 goals. So if you're writing your top 3 goals every morning, it's going to stay in your head and your subconscious stronger. You're going to take more action.
Is it to do with reassuring your priorities and keeping things right up front? Reminder is something which is works as the best medicine to a lot of diversion or maybe distraction that you get to your focus. Something
Exactly.
about maybe the stress reliever thing that everybody is keen to and faces a lot basically. So are there active and passive rituals to stress relief if you feel like, or is it something which is one's personal own way of reducing stress, and how do you give time to that?
Yeah, I tell you, you all have different ways to do it, right? Some people like music, reading a book. Some people need to do something physical, like run, do yoga, play football. I'll give you an example one time. I was teaching in Madrid at a university, and I checked my voicemail, and my voicemail says, we need to get into your flat immediately, there's a leak. Now, I'm living in London, I'm teaching in Madrid, I'm not going to be able to get there. I have to go and teach in another 10 minutes. So what am I going to do? So I put on my iPhone my favorite song, and just for 3-4 minutes, I listen to my favorite song to change my physical state. So, how you think changes how you are physically. How you are physically changes how you think. When you go for a run, you get those endorphins and you feel better and so forth. So the key is to find what matches you and have 2 or 3 different ways. Sometimes you need a half hour to do one. Sometimes you only need 5 minutes. So, pick different ways and do what's meaningful to you, because what's meaningful to me might not be meaningful to you. And if you're copying people in this, it's never working.
Mark, I do remember one of the incident that you share about your observation when somebody has to do 50 minutes from office to home and maybe a 5-minute ride. The 5-minute ride lead to a divorce, and a 50-minute ride to home made things more comfortable. I still have that with me. So it's important, I suppose, for everybody to give time to themselves in terms of relieving the stress. It got to be a part of their day schedule, like maybe your office timings, you got to have a stress release time.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick tip. The most successful people and the happiest people, they have 3 lives. They have a professional life, they have a family life, and they have a personal life, right? So, you got to be strong personally for your family and also your professional life. So you do need some small personal time to do your exercise or other different things so that you could be the best for others.
We've been asking a lot of questions in terms of how to know about your strengths, and if somebody has to identify and focus on the bigger strengths of someone, how do come to know about a lot of strengths of yours?
I think the strengths are always things that come easier for you to learn. So we always learn quicker. We always grow quicker in what we're strengths. So if we're struggling to learn something, maybe that's not quite our strength. But also, you will find what your strength is also by how people interact with you. Because if you're perceived as good at something, they're always asking advice for that too. Yeah. The key is the intersection of your passion and your strength. Because when you have a passion too, you have the energy to keep growing it. So you can be really good at something, but you don't have the passion, you won't grow it to the level where you're going to have a real big advantage. So it's key to learn that intersection between both the passion and the strength.
Mark, when we talk about this aspect of focusing on strength and knowing the strengths and maybe the intersection part, the sweet spot which you talked about, passion, system, and the values. At times in professional job roles, people interact with a lot of other value systems when you talk about individuals. And when you said you got to be good with your interpersonal and communication skills, that's one of the biggest weakness that has led people not to move ahead. How to improve and at the same time deal with that kind of a situation?
Yeah, if you think about it, and if you've taken the DISC surveys or the personality surveys, there's 4 different types of personalities in the world. And if you are only talking to people with your personality and you're not adapting to their personality, you're not connecting with 75% of the world that way. So what I found is it's so important for us to appreciate that other people are different, and we have to adapt our own communication so that we're understood better. You know that some people are thinker type of people and they want more facts. Some people are more social type of people and they're not interested in the facts, they're interested more in a story. You have some people who are very dictator type of people. They don't want a long explanation, they want a short explanation. So I'll give you a tip in terms of how to deal with other people. You have to think right door, right floor. Okay? Right door is you go through their self-interest. You start with the topic that would be in the interest of them, not your interest. Right floor is you discuss at the level of detail that the other person would like to discuss it. So if I'm talking to my boss, I'm going to talk about what's most important for them, and I'm going to talk at a very high level because they want a summary. If I'm talking to a person lower than me in the organization, they're going to want to talk at lower level of detail, and then I might move them up. So right door, their self-interest, right floor, the level of detail. So when you use the right door, they want to talk to you because you're talking about something interest to them. Right floor, they want to keep talking to you because you're talking at the right level of detail. So important.
Right. In the same line of thoughts, if your passion and your work job role does not meet, how do you basically look upon to this? What's your suggestion to people who feel that they're passionate about something else, but their work job role is not something which is coming the same line?
Yeah, I would say that, first you want to find roles, your jobs that use, your sweet spot, because if you don't have your sweet spot in it, however, to be honest, even if you have a job in your sweet spot, there's always something of your job you don't like to do. So it doesn't matter, there's always something in our jobs we don't like to do. What I found is the most successful people, they really are disciplined to do the things they don't like first. Because if you push all the things you don't like to do to the end of the day looks really bad. If you do all the things you don't like to do at the beginning of the day, the rest of the day will look good. I'll tell you, think of it this way. If you can't do the things you don't like to do, you always need a boss to tell you. Right? So, success is 2 things. If you want to climb faster, you have to do 2 things very well. You have to be able to define your own work, and you have to be able to motivate yourself to do it. Because if you can define your own work and you can motivate yourself, you don't need a boss. So think about that. You have to find a way to motivate yourself to do the non-enjoyable. That's key. And sometimes you make a game and Like for me, I don't like doing my bookkeeping oftentimes for the accountant. So I say, okay, what can I do in 30 minutes? And I run a competition on myself. How can I type all these expenses in 30 minutes to get ready? So keep in mind that.
Nice talk on that, Mark. Comes good to me also. I'll try to integrate it a bit. Uh, 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 there is often this misconception, or at times the question: if you're an introvert, how do you communicate well, or is that a limitation to good communication?
No, I think if you're an extrovert, it gives you a head start because you'll engage people better. But again, good communication is via the questions. So I found often introverts will ask more thoughtful questions and will engage people more. Extroverts have a tendency sometimes to be more, not as thoughtful questions, but just more social questions, and they don't engage people as much. So it's like anything in life. When you're too much of one and too much of another, it's always striking the right balance. But if you think about it, the most successful CEOs are more introvert than extrovert.
Yeah, they tend to listen a lot. So listening comes as a key to almost every situations. Uh, uh, One thing
Everything,
to
especially
highlight.
when you're married. Yeah.
Okay, so that relates to me and to maybe a lot of who are in the same situation. Uh, that's by compulsion, or it is something that you'll have to integrate yourself into.
Yeah.
One thing I do recollect, maybe from an earlier discussion with you, was you get a lot of feedbacks. You always say about it. But when you meet with a lot of category of people, some are positive in terms of their attitude toward life, and there are people who are very negative. How do we move in terms of cherry picking people's, or maybe which are the focus areas when it comes to taking feedbacks also?
Yeah, I think, for sure you want to ask feedback from people you really respect. Because if you respect them, you really are listening to what they're saying. But I think the key thing I found is some people they're afraid to ask for feedback or information or advice from people who disagree with them. I found I learned the most by asking for feedback or other information from people who don't think the same as me or disagreeing. I learned the most. They just give you a quick example. When President Kennedy had the Bay of Pigs invasion and the problem in Cuba and everything, and they made mistakes. Then he had the Cuban Missile Crisis, and what happened is there's all different opinions as to what to do. So somebody said this, somebody said that, in his administration. So what he did is he had everybody take the different position. So position A had to argue position B's, and position B's had to argue position A. So they start to see each other's position, and they became closer because of that. So I found that we tend to ask people to what we want to hear. So we only ask people who give good feedback, so we only ask them. I learn the most when I ask feedback of people who are thinking different than me, or even destructive feedback. You can always learn more.
I suppose this is being opportunistic is one of the biggest biases that a lot of financial expert at times have in their professional life, that we look and focus more in terms of our uh, the views which are more in compliance to our uh, viewpoints basically. But then at times feedbacks could be a lot of critics also. When you get that, uh, how to basically focus more on strengths? Your critic
Well,
could be more on your weakness also, Mark, at times.
yeah, and so that's why I said before, don't always ask for just the negative. Ask for the positive too. So you reinforce those strengths, and psychologically, it's good too. Uh, And the other thing is always ask even better, not what you're doing bad, but what could be better. Because sometimes they'll also give you some areas where you could make your strengths even stronger. Okay. So I would say always ask for what am I doing well and what could be even better. That's the best way to ask for feedback.
Among others, any other quick inputs in terms of how to be good leaders? I heard you say something like finding great amongst the goods. So if you could throw a bit light on the same also.
Well, I tell you, if you think about it, leaders have to make decisions. And you have to get comfortable making decisions. And you have to get comfortable making faster decisions. So I found one thing that helped me tremendously as a habit is that when I get an email, I decide right away how to answer that email. And I answer quickly. And so I'm constantly working on making decisions faster and faster by how I answer things. There's only maybe 1% of the things where we should really think about before we answer. But generally, decision making is a muscle. So the more you use the muscle every day, the better you get at it. And the more you force yourself to make faster and faster decisions, it's better. You know, as one Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State says, you know, you need about 80% of the information, and then you have to make a decision. You have to use assumptions and your gut feel on those things. So I'd say is that improve your decision making. You know, keep growing your business judgment, because your ability to make decisions is what's going to allow you to climb. Because if you don't have good judgment and you can't make decisions, your bosses are never going to promote you.
Mark, thank you so much. It's been a real learning session for us. And I myself is pretty much motivated in this tough times to focus and work on the right directions, basically. Would put my efforts to basically areas where I'm missing out. To everybody, just because we're just extending for about 5 minutes, on the handout which is given to you, from the session, from your key learnings, you are required to put your own internal assessment on this. That is things that you'd like to, and Mark could maybe put a highlight to this.
Yeah, I think that do your own reflection at the end of this session here. What do you take away that you can use? Remember, reflection is the opportunity to give yourself advice. Give yourself some advice now and say, out of this session, what could I do differently? And focus on one thing and try to make it a habit. Because if you make it a habit, it becomes automatic and you're going to be much stronger for it.
So things that you would like to do more, as same and less of. Thank you, Mark, for your time. And thanks everybody for taking out time on this platform of CFA India Society, where we keep on focusing in terms of professional learning. I would request again everybody to provide the feedbacks. Your feedbacks are very important. That helps us learn and grow. That is the kind of thing which is going to be our reflection from your point. So do provide positive, negative, whichever ways your feedbacks are. But looking forward for more such learning sessions ahead. Thank you all for your time. This is Gaurav Somani signing off. That's my day.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.